The flames consumed the siege tower before I could reach safety, hungry orange tongues licking at the wooden beams, and I understood with terrible clarity that I was going to burn alive because I had hesitated one moment too long. The heat was already unbearable, smoke filling my lungs, the roar of the fire drowning out the screams of men below, and the clash of battle that raged around the walls of Damascus. I stood on the burning platform 30 feet above the ground with nowhere to run, my sword useless against an enemy that could not be fought, my armor becoming an oven that would cook me in my own skin. And in that moment when death seemed certain and escape impossible, when I should have been praying for salvation or commending my soul to God, I felt nothing but the same hollow emptiness that had consumed me for months. The absence of faith, the certainty that no divine presence watched or cared, the bitter knowledge that I would die without ever believing the words I had spoken for 20 years. I had doubted God since the day my brother knights were slaughtered at Hattin, doubted him through every prayer I mechanically recited, doubted him until doubt became the only truth I possessed. And now the fire would prove me right, would demonstrate that the universe was indifferent, that prayers went unanswered, that I was alone in this burning tower just as I had been alone in my faithlessness. My name is Brother Etienne of Chartres, and I had worn the white mantle for 2 decades without truly believing in the God I claimed to serve. I joined the order at 22, not from conviction, but from necessity, the third son of a minor lord with no inheritance, no prospects, no future beyond the church or the sword. The temple offered both, a chance to escape the suffocating predictability of life in my father's household, while maintaining some measure of honor and purpose. I took my vows with words that sounded right, that conveyed the proper devotion, but even then I was not certain I believed them. God seemed distant, abstract, more concept than reality, and faith felt like a story we told ourselves to make sense of a chaotic world. But I was good at pretending, skilled at performing the rituals and speaking the prayers and maintaining the appearance of devotion that the order required. For years it was enough, this careful performance. This life built on words I did not mean but could convincingly speak. I served in the Holy Land, fought in battles, stood beside brothers who truly believed, and I never let them see the emptiness inside me, the absence where faith should have been. The breaking point came at Hattin, on that terrible day when Saladin's forces surrounded our army, when heat and thirst and tactical disaster combined to create a slaughter that destroyed the kingdom of Jerusalem's military power in a single afternoon. I fought alongside Brother Thomas and Brother Raymond and a dozen other knights I'd lived with for years, men whose faith was absolute, who prayed even as they died, who believed with their last breaths that God would receive them into paradise. I watched them fall one by one, watched their prayers go unanswered, watched faith accomplish nothing except to make their deaths slightly more bearable to those who survived to witness them. And I understood with crushing finality that there was no God watching over us, no divine providence guiding our cause, no heavenly reward waiting beyond death. We were simply men fighting other men over disputed territory, and the words we spoke about holy war and righteous cause were just stories we used to justify violence and make meaning from suffering. I survived Hattin when better men died, was captured and later ransomed, returned to service with the same careful performance of devotion, but now carrying absolute certainty that it was all hollow, all empty, all meaningless ritual concealing the truth that we were alone. For 3 years after Hattin, I continued my service, maintained my façade of faith, spoke prayers I knew were addressed to nothing, participated in rituals that meant nothing beyond their social function of binding our community together. Other brothers noticed something had changed in me, asked if I was troubled, offered spiritual counsel that I accepted with appropriate gratitude, while feeling only contempt for their earnest belief in fantasies. I should have left the order, should have admitted my faithlessness and sought release from vows I no longer believed, but I had nowhere else to go, no other identity beyond the white mantle I wore, no skills beyond warfare and the administrative duties I performed in managing our fortress's supplies. So I remained, a faithless knight among believers, performing devotion I did not feel, speaking words I knew were lies, living a life that seemed increasingly absurd the longer I maintained it. Brother Commander Matthias surely suspected something was wrong, surely saw through my careful performance, but he never challenged me directly, never forced a confrontation that would have required me to either confess my faithlessness or commit to deeper deception. The siege of Damascus began in spring, a desperate attempt to reclaim momentum after years of slow retreat, of Christian holdings falling one by one to Saladin's inexorable advance. We had 2,000 men against a city defended by 10,000, and every rational calculation suggested we would fail. But King Richard believed that boldness could overcome numbers, that one decisive victory might turn the tide of a war we were losing. I participated in the siege with the same mechanical efficiency I brought to all my duties, fought when fighting was required, stood my watches, performed my assigned tasks, all while feeling nothing beyond grim recognition that we were wasting lives on a futile enterprise. The assault on the walls came on a hot July morning. Siege towers pushed forward under cover of archer fire, knights and men-at-arms climbing toward the battlements where defenders waited with oil and arrows, and the desperate determination of men fighting for their homes. I climbed with the others because climbing was expected, because refusing would have marked me as coward, because I had long since accepted that my life had no particular meaning, and dying in a pointless assault was no worse than living with the emptiness that consumed me. I reached the top of the siege tower just as the defenders threw their first pots of burning oil, watched the liquid fire splash across the wooden platform, saw it catch and spread with horrifying speed. Men ahead of me were already burning, their screams high and terrible, their bodies transformed into torches that threw themselves from the tower, rather than endure another second of agony. I should have retreated immediately, should have climbed back down while escape was still possible. But I hesitated, frozen by the sight of so much suffering, by the realization that these men dying in flames had believed God would protect them, had trusted that their faith meant something, and they were discovering in their final moments that faith was no defense against fire. The delay cost me my escape route. Flames blocked the ladder I had climbed, cut off my path to the ground, left me trapped on a platform that was rapidly becoming a funeral pyre. I looked down at the ground 30 feet below, at the hard-packed earth that would shatter my legs if I jumped, but might at least offer death faster than burning. And as I stood there calculating odds of survival, weighing the quick death of the fall against the slow horror of the flames, I realized I was not praying, was not calling out to God for rescue, was not even maintaining the pretense of faith in this moment when death approached. The fire surrounded me completely now, a wall of heat and smoke that made breathing torture, that began to melt the links of my mail, that promised death within minutes if not seconds. I had seen men burn before and knew what awaited me. The skin blackening and splitting, the flesh cooking, the hair igniting, the agony that would overwhelm every other sensation until blessed unconsciousness or death finally came. I should have felt terror, should have been screaming like the others, should have been doing something beyond standing here in strange, calm contemplation of my approaching end, but I felt only a bitter satisfaction that my death would prove what I had believed for years, that there was no God to save me, no divine intervention, no miracle, just the natural consequence of standing too long on a burning tower. Let the flames come, I thought. Let them demonstrate the truth of a godless universe. Let them prove that prayers are just words spoken into emptiness. Let them end this performance I have maintained for too long. I closed my eyes and I waited for the fire to take me. Waited for death to complete what doubt had already accomplished. The voice came from within the flames, or perhaps from within my own mind. I could not tell which. But it spoke with terrible clarity. You think I am not here because I did not prevent suffering. You think I am absent because I did not save your brothers at Hattin. But suffering does not prove my absence, Etienne. It proves only that this world is broken, that pain is real, that the cost of freedom is the possibility of evil. I have never been distant. You have been distant, have turned away, have chosen emptiness over the difficulty of faith. But I am here in the fire with you now, as I was with your brothers when they died, as I am with every soul that suffers. The question is whether you will finally see me, finally acknowledge what you have spent years denying. I opened my eyes and the flames were still there, still surrounding me, still promising death. But I also saw something else, something I could not explain or rationalize, something that contradicted everything I believed about the universe's indifference. The fire was not touching me. It surrounded me completely, roared on every side, consumed the tower beneath my feet. But where I stood was a circle of space untouched by flames, as though an invisible barrier held back the destruction that should have already killed me. I staggered backward, my mind rejecting what my eyes witnessed, searching for rational explanation, finding none that fit what I was experiencing. Heat mirages, I thought desperately. Delusion caused by smoke inhalation. Hallucination as my oxygen-starved brain began to fail. But the circle remained. The flames kept their distance. And I stood in the midst of an inferno that should have killed me, but had not. Could not, because something I did not understand was protecting me from destruction. I fell to my knees, not in prayer but in simple shock, in the collapse of every certainty I had built over 3 years of faithlessness. And kneeling there in the midst of fire, I heard that voice again. You wanted proof. You wanted evidence that would overcome your doubt, that would make faith easy rather than difficult. But proof destroys the possibility of genuine faith, reduces love to calculation, transforms devotion into transaction. I do not save you to prove I exist. I save you because I love you, because I have always loved you, because even your doubt and your anger and your years of pretending could not make me abandon you. The fire has not touched you not because you deserve protection, but because grace is not earned, mercy is not merited, love is not conditional on your belief or your faithfulness, or anything except my nature. The tower collapsed beneath me, the burning wood finally giving way, and I should have fallen with it, should have been crushed or burned in the ruins. Instead, I found myself standing on the ground, somehow transported there by means I could not comprehend. My armor scorched, but my body unharmed, surrounded by the wreckage of the siege tower that had become my funeral pyre and my place of revelation. Brother knights were staring at me with expressions of shock and wonder, having witnessed something they could not explain, having seen a man emerge alive from flames that should have killed him. Brother Commander Matthias pushed through the crowd, his weathered face stunned, and he gripped my shoulders and demanded, "How did you survive? We saw the tower collapse, saw the flames consume it completely. You should be dead, Etienne. How are you standing here alive?" I met his eyes and I felt tears running down my soot-stained face, felt the walls I had built around my heart crumbling, felt faith rushing back like water into a vessel I had believed was permanently empty. "I do not know," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought I was going to die. I thought there was no God to save me. But I was wrong, Matthias. I have been wrong about everything." The assault on Damascus failed, as I had known it would, as any rational assessment would have predicted. We retreated with heavy losses, abandoned the siege, accepted that we lacked the strength to take the city. But I barely noticed the failure because I was consumed by what had happened in the fire, by the experience that had shattered my carefully constructed faithlessness, by the voice I had heard, and the protection I had received, and the undeniable reality that something I could not explain had preserved me when I should have died. In the days that followed, I tried to rationalize what had occurred, tried to find natural explanations for my survival, tried to restore the comfortable certainty of my doubt. But every rationalization collapsed under the weight of what I had witnessed. Every explanation fell short of accounting for the circle of safety in the midst of flames. Every attempt to dismiss the experience as hallucination or luck failed because I knew what I had seen, what I had felt, what I had heard in that moment when death seemed certain. Brother Matthias came to me a week after the siege ended, found me in the chapel where I knelt for the first time in 3 years, actually trying to pray rather than simply performing the motions. He sat beside me and spoke quietly. "Something changed in you on that burning tower. I have watched you for 3 years, Etienne, watched you go through the motions of faith without genuine belief, watched you perform devotion while your heart remained empty. I knew you had lost your faith at Hattin, knew you stayed with us only because you had nowhere else to go. But you are different now. What happened in that fire?" I struggled to find words for an experience that transcended language, for an encounter that had demolished every intellectual framework I possessed. "I met God," I finally said. "Or he met me. I do not know how to describe it, Matthias. I have spent 3 years absolutely certain he did not exist, certain that faith was delusion, and prayer was talking to emptiness. And then I stood in the fire, and I heard his voice, felt his presence, experienced protection I cannot explain or rationalize. I was faithless, and he saved me anyway. I had rejected him, and he did not reject me. I had doubted everything, and he proved himself real in the one way I could not ignore or dismiss. Matthias was quiet for a long time, then spoke with unexpected gentleness. Doubt is not the opposite of faith, Etienne. Certainty is the opposite of faith. Doubt is simply faith tested, faith made honest, faith stripped of the comfortable illusions we use to avoid wrestling with hard questions. You doubted because you saw suffering and could not reconcile it with a God of love. That is not sin. That is being human, being honest about the gap between what we believe and what we experience. But you made the mistake of thinking that because God did not prevent suffering, he must not exist. You confused his refusal to spare us pain with his absence, his respect for human freedom with his indifference. The fire did not prove he exists. The fire proved he is present even in suffering, that he does not remove us from pain but walks through it with us, that grace is real even when protection is not guaranteed. He paused, then continued. You have been given a gift, brother. Not the gift of miraculous rescue, but the gift of encountering God when you had given up believing he could be found. What will you do with that gift? Will you return to faithlessness when the memory fades, when the experience becomes distant, when doubt creeps back as it inevitably will? Or will you build something different? Something more honest than your old performance of devotion? Something that acknowledges doubt while choosing faith anyway? I thought about his question for days, weeks, months as we retreated from Damascus, as we returned to the fortress that had been my home for 7 years, as I resumed the routines of daily service that had become so mechanical during my years of faithlessness. I discovered that faith after doubt was different from faith before doubt, that the certainty I had lost at Hattin could not be recovered, but something else could take its place, a choice to trust despite uncertainty, a commitment to believe despite unanswered questions, a willingness to serve even when serving made no rational sense. The experience in the fire had not eliminated my doubts. I still wrestled with the problem of suffering, still struggled to reconcile God's love with the reality of pain, still questioned why some prayers seemed answered and others did not. But I could no longer deny that I had encountered something real, something beyond my understanding, something that had saved me when I deserved nothing except the death my faithlessness had earned. And if that encounter was real, if God had met me in the midst of fire, then perhaps faith was less about having all the answers and more about trusting the one who did. I served in the order for another 20 years after that day on the burning tower, served with a faith that was harder won and less certain than what I had pretended to possess in my youth, but also more honest, more resilient, more capable of surviving the difficulties that had shattered my earlier beliefs. I told my story to young knights who struggled with doubt, who questioned whether God was real or prayer was meaningful, or faith was anything beyond comfortable delusion. I told them that I had doubted completely, had rejected everything, had stood in the fire certain that no God existed to save me, and I told them that I had been wrong, that God had met me in my faithlessness, that grace had found me when I was not seeking it, that the universe was not the cold, indifferent mechanism I had believed it to be. Some understood, some did not. And I learned not to demand that my experience become their proof, not to insist that what convinced me should convince them, not to use my story as a weapon against those who struggled as I had struggled. I am an old man now, approaching 70, my body marked by decades of warfare and hardship, my faith still tested by questions I cannot fully answer. The order I served has been destroyed by kings who coveted our wealth, and a pope who lacked courage to defend us. Most of my brothers are dead or scattered. The mission we devoted our lives to ended in failure by any worldly measure. But I have not returned to the faithlessness that consumed me after Hattin, have not concluded that our defeat proves God's absence or our service meaningless. I learned in the fire that God's presence is not measured by whether he gives us victory or spares us suffering, that faith is not invalidated by unanswered prayers or temporal failure, that grace is real even when the world seems governed by chaos and injustice. I doubted God completely, rejected him absolutely, stood in flames certain that no divine presence existed to save me. And he saved me anyway, not because I deserved rescue, but because mercy is not earned, because love persists even when we turn away, because faith is ultimately his gift rather than our achievement. This is my testimony, my witness to those who come after, that I was faithless and found God in the midst of fire, that doubt was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a different faith, that grace met me in my emptiness and transformed it into something that could hold belief despite uncertainty. I do not claim to understand why I was saved when others burned, why my prayers went unanswered for years and then were answered in ways I could not have imagined, why some experience God's presence while others feel only his absence. These mysteries remain, will always remain, cannot be resolved by any explanation I could offer. But I know what I experienced in that burning tower. Know that the voice I heard was real. Know that the protection I received cannot be explained by chance or hallucination or any rationalization my doubting mind attempted. God met me when I had given up seeking him, found me when I believed I was alone, saved me when I thought I deserved nothing except the death my faithlessness had earned. To those who doubt, who struggle, who stand in their own fires certain that no God exists to save them, I offer this hope, that faith is not destroyed by honest doubt, that God is not offended by our questions, that grace finds us even in our faithlessness. You may not receive miraculous rescue. You may not hear voices or witness inexplicable protection. Your faith may look nothing like mine, and that is acceptable, even necessary, because we each encounter God in ways shaped by our unique wounds and questions and circumstances. But do not mistake his silence for his absence, his refusal to spare you pain for his indifference, the reality of suffering for proof that the universe is empty. I stood in fire and he was there, not preventing my suffering but present within it, not eliminating pain but walking through it beside me, not offering easy answers but offering himself, which proved to be enough even when it was not what I wanted. Non nobis, Domine, non nobis, sed nomini tuo de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name give glory. I doubted these words for years, spoke them without believing, performed devotion without faith, and then I learned in flames that they were true despite my doubt, that glory belongs to God regardless of whether we acknowledge it, that his reality is not dependent on our belief or our certainty, or anything except his own nature. I was faithless and found him in fire. That is my story, my witness, my gift to those who struggle as I struggled. The testimony that faith survives doubt, that God meets us in our emptiness, that grace is real even for those who have spent years denying it. The fire did not destroy my doubt. The fire transformed my doubt into a different kind of faith, one that acknowledges uncertainty while choosing trust, one that questions honestly while remaining committed, one that struggles without abandoning, one that doubts and believes simultaneously, because that is what faith looks like when it has been tested by fire and emerged on the other side still breathing, still hoping, still believing. Despite everything, that faith is not delusion, but the truest response to a reality deeper than what our limited perception can fully comprehend.